Correct. Perfect. Thank you for having me this third time on the frog. Today, I would like to take you on a hopefully fun little ride into the world of linguistics, because that's where I originally come from before I entered the game studies. And I would like to show, as you just said, how semantics make us accept spellcasting as science. And you can see here that Arthur C. Clarke quote we've heard so often today, a little bit twisted. Any sufficiently advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology. This is the quote I stole from the game Cookie Clicker that uses it. And I think it's a nice sentence to just hang up what I would like to show you. I've put a little definition for what fantasy is here. It's from Encyclopedia Britannica. It's not highbrow. We've heard a lot of more detailed definitions in the course of the day. This is just to lead into what I'm going to tell you. Let me just read it out. Fantasy is imaginative fiction dependent for effect on strangeness of setting, such as other worlds or times, and of characters, such as supernatural or unnatural beings. So imagine we're talking about games, then if I think about magic as an act in a fantasy game, I don't have to think very hard. I have, for example, flinging lightning in the Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, for example, or any other Elder Scrolls. I also have Dark Souls with different kinds of magic, and some of them are called miracles, some of them are called pyromancy, but in general, nothing of this is not magic in any way. So the first slide said something about science, right? So when does magic in some form or another become science? And for that, naturally, I had to look at the definition, again, from Encyclopedia Britannica, nothing fancy, for science fiction. Science fiction, a form of fiction that deals principally with the impact of actual or imagined science, upon society or individuals. So science plays a huge factor in science fiction, obviously. And if I think about something like magic in science fiction, because that's what I want to have a look at, I maybe have to think a little bit harder, but not so much, because one of the prime science fiction game examples that most people played, or that at least a lot of people love, would be Mass Effect. Mass Effect is classical science fiction, I'd argue. Still, there are some things on the next slides that are raised my brow. There is also something like the entire immersive sim genre, basically. You got a little picture here from Prey. Prey plays on a space station that naturally is overrun with aliens. There are typical science fiction tropes. There are futury, spacey weapons, the whole thing you would expect. But, and this is again from the definition of fantasy, these two are not connected in their definitions that I used here. Science fiction can be seen as a form of fantasy, but the terms are not interchangeable, as science fiction usually is set in the future and is based on some aspect of science or technology. We've had that in the other definition, while fantasy is set in an imaginary world and features the magic of mythical beings. I had to use this definition because the magic word is literally right here. So if magic is one of the factors that differentiates fantasy from science fiction, or rather the absence of magic is one of the factors that differentiates science fiction from fantasy, then what's wrong with these games? We have in all of these games, in a lot of science fiction games, we have something that you can't tell me otherwise is magic. We can fling fireballs in Prey. We can levitate enemies in Prey, for examples. We have biotics in Mass Effect, where we can again fling people with the power of our mind. We can do the same thing most prominently, in my opinion, in BioShock, where there are the plasmids, where we can learn stuff that isn't humanly possible. We can incinerate people with a flick of our finger. We can freeze them by just looking at them. How is that science? How is that not magic? Something in the context of the game, in the setting, or the background of those things we can do, of the explanation, or the actual execution of those spells, if I can call them that, must make it so that they are not magic, but they are science. Something makes those unexplainable things explainable to make them scientific. And just a little content notion here on the next slides. There are some syringes. I know people are some people are upset by that. So if you don't like that, just look away for a few seconds. In all of these games, we have some kind of background information that puts these spells into the context of science. We have plasmids in BioShock, which is made from a substance that can override genes. It's basically gene therapy, splicing. The enemies in BioShock are even called splicers. We have basically the same thing in Prey. I don't know what these games have with syringes, with injectors. It's weird, but we can rewrite our neural connections in our brain in Prey by injecting a so-called neuron mod. In Mass Effect, we have the discovery of a mysterious new mineral called element 0 that produces the sad mass effects, which can be, by certain people, used to levitate stuff, for example. So context is everything. We need an explanation. We need context for all those spells to stop being spells, to start being scientifically reasonable. We have in-fiction details that change the in-fiction context. So we accept this out-fictional genre change. And linguistically, that's remarkable because it's basically could be one word missing and we could be sorting Prey into another genre altogether. And in linguistics, this is the turn to what I would like to teach you, show you today. In linguistics, we call this framing, frame semantics rather. Frame semantics is a field that has been pioneered by someone called Charles Fillmore, and later on by Charles Fillmore and Sue Atkins together. These two are the parents of frame semantics. And funnily enough, while there are several photos of Fillmore himself, this is the only picture in the entire internet that can be found about Beryl Atkins, called Sue Atkins. Make of that what you will. Frame semantics can mean, or a part of frame semantics is the basic thesis of frame semantics is that word meanings are defined in relation to the frame of reference they belong to, or in other words, that words are understood by cognitively evoking all the other words associated with the same frame. So all related words are activated in our thinking apparatus at the same time. Otherwise, we wouldn't understand the one word in question. An example of that could roughly look like this. The transactional frame was the prime example of Fillmore. That's why I use it here. If we are to understand what buying is, we automatically activate our knowledge of what selling is, what money is, in turn, what an exchange, a transaction is, because money is just a conduct. We don't necessarily need it. By understanding buying and selling, we also understand exchange. By understanding transactions in general, we also understand financial transactions if we are able to understand the concept of money. This is the theory of frame semantics. All of these words are connected. I tried to show by different thickness and size of the words that, of course, these connections are either stronger, like buy and sell, or weaker, like buying and transactions in general. One could also put online transactions like eBay or credit cards or taxes even into these frames, and their connection would be weaker and weaker, but it would be there. And to research these kinds of frames, Fillmore and Atkins build a program called FrameNet. And FrameNet is collecting all of these frames, or as many frames as possible, the attributes of their components, their syntactic positions, and so on. FrameNet looks like this if you want to use it. It's a bit hard to use. It's a bit archaic and old, but I took here the annotation for the frame elements of the noun magic, just as an example. But with a little work, one can use FrameNet to great effect. Because also this concept of frames is used, for example, in speech recognition in certain cases, or machine translation also. This is a little throwback Friday, this doesn't work, to the Frog 2019 was my first Frog, where a colleague of mine, Rudolf Inderst, and me did something on FrameNet as well in the context of speech recognition and Cortana. So if you have any interest in that, you can click here. That was the ad break. And funnily enough, and I did not know that when I started to work on this presentation, FrameNet does put the word magic, the concept of magic, in the frame of ineffability. And I love this word. I don't know if you know this scene from Good Omens, from the Amazon show. This is Michael Sheen as the archangel, telling us that everybody knows the great plan of God, but the ineffable plan, nobody does, nobody can even speak of it, because that's exactly what ineffability means. Indescribability, this definition is from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, incapable of being expressed in word. And I find it quite fitting that this FrameNet, this resource, puts magic into the context of indescribability, also in the context of all the other presentations we've heard today. So this is just another example of the frame ineffability, where you can see here prominently she had a magical quality. So magic is a very integral part of this frame. However, don't remember this. If you remember anything about the frame of ineffability, remember this one. Remember Michael Sheen. This is a good way to talk about, to think about ineffability. So if this integral component in our cognitive apparatus, whether the concept is ineffable or not, defines if it's magic, then I think that fits quite nicely with our separation of magic and science fiction in the context of the game examples that I brought with. If we can fling fireballs and throw lightning in Prey or in BioShock or in Mass Effect. Then we have some kind of explanation, always, like I showed you. We have neuromods, we have plasmids in BioShock, we have the Mass Effect, which is produced by fiddling with this element 0. All of those are roughly based on an actual scientific concept. Neuromods are explained in the game to alter the mirror neurons of people to more likely resemble the empathic qualities of the aliens that can fling fireballs, so we can also fling fireballs. Plasmids, like I said, are some kind of gene therapy. They rewrite our DNA, so suddenly it's humanly possible to fling a fireball. And for Mass Effect, it's more of a trope than actual scientific knowledge. I'd say there's space exploration, like in any good scientific literature, and we find a new element, something that does not exist on Earth, that unlocks the potential of humankind. And all of this is somehow plausible to us. We sometimes have to bring with us a bigger suspension of disbelief than in other kinds, but all of this is somehow plausible because we've heard about it in media, pop science literature, or sci-fi literature, like the discovery of a new element that unlocks new potentials, which in turn makes it in some way compatible with our humanly cognition, with the frame of reality that we find on Earth, which makes it science, or science fiction, I should write, rather. We can believe that this is the science of the in-game world. And in turn, if we go to the fantastic example of Skyrim, we also have some resource. We have mana or magica or however it's called. And that's where our understanding stops. Why does it exist? Is it because of demonic intervention, like for example in Shin Megami Tensei? Is it divine intervention, like the gods, the 7 gods of Skyrim? Why can we magic? Why can we spellcast? We have no idea. We don't know where it comes from. And this is where the trail of cognition breaks. It's incompatible with our basic understanding of the world frame, of the reality frame. And that's what makes it magic. So I don't know how I am in time, but I am finished. Thank you for listening. I hope that was a little bit of fun here at the end of the first day. If you want to see the magic of love, visit Keinen Pixel den Faschisten if you speak German. If you want to see more on the magic of language, there's the link to my game studies and linguistics website. And also, if you want to connect on Twitter, feel free to use one of those tags. There are my very sparse sources for this presentation, and thank you very much.
Thank you for your talk.